You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. And at the start of every week, I sit down with another journalist to talk about the biggest news developing right now and how it affects the Pacific Northwest. Joining me now, she's an alto, if you're talking in singing terminology. I just learned this. KUOW politics editor Kat Smith. I will not be asking you to sing opera. We are talking about opera later today.
I'm not warmed up.
We will not. We won't go there. We were just talking about gas prices, though, a little bit before the show, and I just double checked. You know, the average price for a gallon in Washington State is at $4.63 right now. That's up almost 30 cents in just a week. Obviously, since the war with Iran started, we have the second highest. This is typical, though, for Washington. The second highest gas prices, in the country right now. California is at $5.20.
Wow.
Hawaii's right on our heels. Nevada and Oregon both over $4 per gallon. Most of the country hovering in the $3 range. You know, the New York Times says that U.S. gas prices jumped 17% just since the start of the war on February 28th. You saw crude oil spiking over the weekend because more oil infrastructure got hit. It's the highest since Russia invaded Ukraine. And I'm curious, as this all, the lag effect of crude oil spiking and then things happening at the pump is usually, some days or weeks. But there's no sign of let up in this war. And I'm watching for how Washingtonians and other Americans around the country are affected by gas prices. Because it's not just what you pay at the pump, right? It's everything. It's the cost of goods, transportation,
shipping,
everything.
Food. And I will say we're about $1 from our record high gas price, which I think was in 2023. And so we're, gas prices tend to climb higher as we move into the summer for a combination of reasons. And I think that year there was a combo of there was a fuel squeeze on our main fuel pipeline and effects from the carbon auctions in the state.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to keep an eye on this as war continues in the Middle East and our typical summer jump in prices. I think we're probably in for a rocky road.
Yeah. Washington State, it's a combination of things. There's the carbon auctions, there's refining costs, transportation, distribution, all kinds of things that push our fuel higher.
So many things.
A lot of different things. I want to turn to our top story because it is also about affordability and costs, although maybe for a different set of folks in Washington.
If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million.
Well, if you had $1 million in income and you live in Washington, you might be paying a new tax soon. Looks like the Millionaire's tax, the so-called Millionaire's tax, is headed to the House floor for a final vote later today,
or maybe tomorrow.
Kat, it's coming. It's coming really soon. Governor Ferguson says he's on board to sign it. Just to recap for folks, this is a 9.9% tax on every dollar of income over $1 million. It's estimated to rake in between $3 and $4 billion in revenue yearly and affect 20 to 30,000 households in the state. Democrats have tweaked this since it was first introduced. There are new sweeteners for small businesses, sales tax cuts for things like diapers, personal hygiene items. I saw over-the-counter meds are going to be exempt from sales tax.
That was a new one.
Yeah, new ad. Republicans say, of course, this is going to tank our economy. It's going to drive away investment and entrepreneurship, and they say it's not going to last as a millionaire's tax.
Eventually, they say it'll come for all of us.
Widen, yeah. What stands out to you about where we're at in the debate in these final days of the session in Olympia?
Well, I mean, one thing to just, level set and remind that this wouldn't kick in for, or this would only kick in for income starting in 2028. So 2029 would be when the state begins to get revenue. So we're not talking about, even though there's like that emergency clause in the bill that says it would go into effect immediately, the state's not going to see any revenue from this for a while. But I think also just right now, I was on the official Washington State Legislature page for this bill and how it's changed, and there are like over 80 amendments. So I actually don't want to get too far out over my skis because more things could continue to change with this bill.
80 amendments.
More than 80. I was reading the bill this morning. It's doubled in size since it was introduced a couple months ago, and it's just going to keep changing. And when we're in this last this race to the finish line for sine die.
Some of that is Republicans trying to slow the process down, right? They're going to be doing all kinds of things on the floor because they are trying to run the clock out before the session ends on Thursday.
Yeah. And so Republicans are going to make their big final stand today. And so, I was talking with our reporter in Olympia this morning, and we were like, when do you think we could see a vote on this bill? And she was like, oh, I don't know. It could take like 20 hours to get through all 80 of these. Maybe we'll see a vote tomorrow. I don't know. So Godspeed Sarah Mises Tan in Olympia, who's going to be following this drama on the House floor today.
No kidding. So what kind of changes do you see that got this across the finish line? Because we heard from Governor Ferguson that this was not even close.
Yeah.
That he wanted to see a lot more of this money go to working class folks in Washington, go to small businesses. I mean, what do you see changed that got this to the point where Ferguson on Friday said, yep, I'm going to support this. I'm going to urge passage.
Yeah, well, top line is he did not get everything he wanted. I think he was talking a really big game about how much, tax breaks, how big tax breaks he want, how many people included in that. How many working families would be added to the working families tax credit, how many small and medium-sized business he wanted to get tax relief. And he didn't get everything that he wanted, but there is stuff in here that appealed to him. And so he's now backed down. That's the nature of compromise, right? Nobody gets exactly what they want.
There is an expansion on the working families tax credit, but like the overall amount that's going to go back to taxpayers is not nearly... He said he wanted half
the revenue
of
this income tax to go toward tax relief.
And right now, I think it's
not what we're seeing.
Yeah, Washington Observer estimated it was like at 30%.
Oh, is it that low? Okay. Yeah.
That's according to Paul Query and his team.
So, okay, they're doing compromises. So here we've got working family tax credit expansion would add eligibility for almost 500,000 households. And so I think that would be a total of 800,000 households that would now be eligible for that tax credit. Ferguson also said in his announcement that he's happy to see that there's free school breakfast and lunch for K through 12 kids. Now, Libby, you and I were just talking about this. This is almost like a wish line item at the top of the bill that just says, hey, we're going to pay for free school lunches and stuff. But they don't really say how they're going to do it or exactly how much money. And you noticed something, right? You said the Washington Observer had a note about this.
Shout out. They've been combing through and they say basically that this $280 million that it would take to pay for free lunch and free breakfast, it has not been earmarked in this bill, that's going to have to be hashed out in the budgetary session and that there could still be a, quote, Lucy with the football moment later on once budget negotiations happen. But I think it also gives Ferguson cover to say, I said I wanted more back to working people, and this is an example of something that we achieved. And it's very hard to imagine anyone saying, we want kids to go hungry, right? Like if you're talking about a new tax, it probably helps to say part of this new tax on millionaires, it's going to go to put a breakfast and a lunch on a kid's plate who can't afford it.
Right. Another thing that is in here that's new that I hadn't seen before this morning was the new version of the bill wants the 5% of the revenue is going to go to childcare and early learning programs instead of trying to create a fund for public defense for counties struggling public defense funds. That was in the initial bill. It no longer exists in this current bill. So they're going big on childcare or bigger on childcare in this version of the bill. Also in this one, no sales tax holiday. Like Ferguson had suggested, he had that press conference a few weeks ago where one of the big proposals that he said he wanted to see in this income tax bill was a sales tax, at least two sales tax holidays.
Yeah, for stuff up to $1,000, purchases up to $1,000.
And that's not in here anymore. No. But yeah, he's still on board.
Yeah.
He says he's still going to sign it.
I just really interesting to see kind of the tough talk from the governor. Again, suggesting in a letter to supporters last week that they should punt the income tax debate and the bill to 2027.
Yeah.
Just, again, under a week later, he's on board and saying, no, this is great. Let's get it across the finish line. There is a kind of let's wait and see what big business does at this point, because as Jim Brunner pointed out in the Times, this bill does not include the break for larger businesses, the B&O surcharge that was supposed to sunset early in a previous version. That has been removed at the behest of progressives, saying that was a giveaway to large businesses. So the question is now, is that going to lead to more larger businesses folks like Brad Smith at Microsoft or other entrepreneurs saying that B&O surcharge, tax sunset issue was going to maybe keep us on the sidelines to fight a future challenge. And now we are going to get in this fight. Republican opposition, again, saying that this is going to lead rich people and business folks to leave the state even more than they are, and that this is going to hit your pocketbook soon. I mean, it's hard to predict how wealthy people will respond according to the data that we have existing, studies that we have existing. But anecdata is very strong that this has mobilized the tech community in Washington against it.
Anecdotally, we don't really have data yet because the thing hasn't passed, and there isn't a lot of there is research into what rich people do when taxes spike, but it's mixed.
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
One of the things that I've been kind of struggling with when I read about what research and what analysis does exist in this area is that people who read it, human beings, are very flawed, and people tend to bring their own political biases into how they're reading that data. So I will just, having said that caveat, I will just say that my takeaway from the mixed research that I have read is that super rich people do leave when taxes spike, but a very small number of them leave. We're talking, these are like fringe edge cases. So
who like to talk about it on Twitter. Yeah.
Right. So you can point to individual cases of very wealthy people fleeing, but there isn't research to suggest that there has been like a mass millionaire migration in the past. We just haven't seen it yet. I don't know, maybe one day we will, but that hasn't existed yet. And I will also mention something interesting I was reading this morning is that there are oftentimes social factors that, press on people when they're weighing whether or not to leave a place. And people that are very, very wealthy tend to be, they have a lot of deep social ties to the area where they live, or they're at the top of their field. And those factors, sometimes more than the money, can influence them to stay. We're getting a little squishy here. This is some soft science stuff. But I tend to think about this just in terms of money, and it's not always a money consideration. And something that I like to remind myself when people bring up the fact that Jeff Bezos left our state shortly after we implemented our capital gains tax is that he has ties to Florida. He has family in Florida, and he's never specifically said he left because of our cap gains tax.
He's not from Seattle originally. I would say the Washington Policy Center, a conservative think tank, published a letter that was from a handful of tech leaders that said, quote, voting for a state income tax would set Washington's economic growth back for decades, making it virtually impossible to compete with California, where the tech ecosystem is far stronger, and low-tax states like Texas. That was interesting to me because we are one of 9 states that does not have an income tax. Mm-hmm. So there's not that many places to leave to avoid income tax. Texas and Florida are the big ones. But to bring up California and basically say the thing on the West Coast that has given Washington its competitive edge when trying to draw people from California has been this income tax. Like basically saying there's more of an ecosystem in California, and if you're already going to be a super high tax state like California, then people will just stay there. That was kind of a new angle, which I found interesting. Of course, again, this is something that's going to be challenged in the courtroom. Yep. We have a uniformity clause in the Constitution that says all income or all property has to be taxed uniformly. And in the past, the Supreme Court has said that income counts as property. And so that is going to be the question that's going to be relitigated. But
that ruling is from 90 years ago.
Yeah, it's long.
It's time. Maybe it's time for another check-in on that.
And there's certainly a different composition of the state Supreme Court. Yep. This is also going to be a challenge at the ballot box, Kat. And so I was texting Brian Haywood this morning with Let's Go Washington, trying to see if, he would give me an indication if he wants to get in this fight this year to try to get a challenge to the millionaire's tax on the ballot in November. I haven't got an answer from Brian yet. The cutoff for signatures is July 4th. So there is still a time with something that's this big of a deal, this hot button, to gather signatures and try to get that challenge on the ballot.
It's not a lot of time. They don't have a lot of runway. But the reason why we're talking about Brian Haywood and Let's Go Washington is that he has this proven network of signature gatherers with Let's Go Washington, his political action nonprofit. we have seen them collect signatures with very short runway, ended up getting measures on the ballot that same year that ended up going on to pass. The natural gas ban initiative a couple years ago did that. And that was that Brian Haywood helped get them over the finish line. He didn't help start that initiative, but he did help get them over the finish line and collect those signatures in a very short amount of time. So he's done it before. Now it's just a question of whether he's going to step into this fight and do it again.
Yeah, but we had this conversation last week, in terms of some sort of surge of Democratic support that's expected for this midterms. Mm-hmm. Are Republicans going to want the challenge to an income tax on the ballot when there are a ton of Trump-motivated blue voters in Washington going to the polls? Or are they going to want it next year when it's a little bit less of a, Trump backlash is on the mind?
Okay, but I read something last week that said there may be, in states like ours, progressive swell to the polls because of anger over Trump. So that maybe there will be so many progressives in Washington state voting that this is a good opportunity for people to strike down an initiative against the income tax. I don't know. So there are people behind the scenes weighing these calculations.
Yeah, Democrats would love if the challenge ends up on the ballot. Definitely this fall.
These are being weighed right now.
Yeah. I'm talking with Kat Smith, a politics editor at KUOW. And again, we are watching for that floor debate and that vote to happen maybe today in Olympia on the Millionaire's tax.
Grab the popcorn.
Step inside Boyd's Clocks.
Boyd's Clocks.
And you'll feel it immediately.
They don't like that spring forward. They don't like losing that hour.
Definitely not good. I do not like to lose sleep. That is the worst.
Shout out to Natalie Swaby at King 5 to get us started here on our second story for Front Page today on Soundside. Just a really fun feature on what happens at a clock repair shop when people jump forward, when we spring forward and add daylight savings time to the mix and all the extra repairs that have to happen. Like when you're physically changing the clock dial, they break a lot. And so this Boyd's repair shop in Renton, Natalie went there and got just a ton of really fun tape. So Kat, are you still feeling the spring forward fog? Because I sure am.
It's so bad, Libby. I'm on my fourth cup of coffee. Although I will say, the ventilation hood in my kitchen above my stove, I never actually changed it back. So it's finally accurate again.
That's the loophole.
This is how much I hate changing my clocks.
Yeah. So this is the reason we're talking about this, not just to complain that we lost sleep over the weekend. This is the last time our neighbors in the Great North, British Columbia, will be setting their clocks forward. The province of British Columbia is moving permanently to daylight saving time. Here is part of the official statement. It says, this change is better for our health, our routines, and gives us an extra hour of daylight during those dark winter months. It also simplifies life for businesses and service providers and for everyone who said they're ready for a permanent change. What do you think, Kat? Are we jealous of British Columbia?
I mean, I'm jealous that they don't have to change their clocks anymore. That's cool. But I thought the research said the opposite, that if you do permanent standard time is where the health benefits come in. They're going to have darker mornings.
I also have heard that from sleep experts because you're supposed to get the sunlight in the morning. And a friend of the show, David Croman, over at the Times, pointed out on Twitter, if we permanently go to daylight saving time, that basically shifts the daylight hours later in the day. And in December and January, that means that the sun doesn't rise until almost 9 a.m.
That's rough.
So most of us will be commuting in the dark in December and January. I would be at the office before the sun even comes up, so I wouldn't really see the sun until after work. Now, would you have more time after work? Yes.
And that's cool. I like that. But dark during the day. And plus, because they're on the far western edge of their time zone, so you're getting double screwed in the wintertime.
Yeah. This is all something that's been debated before because Washington tried to do what BC has done and end the spring forward and back cycle. There was the Ditch the Switch bill that passed in 2019 in our legislature that made daylight saving time permanent. But we can't actually do that. Congress has to approve that change, and there's no indication that that's going to happen.
Well, guess what?
What?
We did try to do that in the early 70s. Right before we went on the air, I looked this up. There's an NPR story that in the early 1970s, because of the energy crisis, they tried to ditch They tried to make daylight savings time permanent.
Are you telling me there's a connection to what we just talked about at the beginning of the show, an energy crisis and oil
yeah.
prices, to the daylight savings time story? This is kismet. Okay, go ahead.
It didn't work. Within 2 years, they had gotten rid of the law because everyone hated it so much.
Oh, well.
They hated how dark it was all the time, and it failed.
All right, then. Well, good luck, British Columbia. Permanent daylight saving time. No end for the switch and the clock changes for Washington, at least for now.
I hate it so much.
Moving on to our last story on Front Page. And brace yourselves, art lovers.
I admire people, and I've done it myself, to go on a talk show and go, hey, we got to keep movie theaters alive. You know, we got to keep this genre alive. And I don't want to be working in ballet or opera or, you know, things where it's like, hey, keep this thing alive, even though no one cares about this anymore. All respect to the ballet and opera people out there. I just lost 14 cents in viewership.
That is the voice of a lesser known, a struggling performing artist, Kat. His name is, I just want to make sure I pronounce this correctly, Timothy Chalamet. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's trying to make a name for himself. The Oscar hopeful Timothy Chalamet got in some hot water after somebody clipped a part of this Variety CNN town hall from last month where he just did a broadside against opera and ballet performers. What? They say don't punch down, right? This guy is one of the most successful actors of his generation, and he's just casually dissing opera and ballet performers. So the reason we're talking about it, the reason it's a local story, is that the Seattle Opera engaged in some light social media trolling of Timmy. A clapback, if you will. Seattle Opera offered a discount code for tickets to see Carmen over the weekend, and that code was Timothy, spelled with the double E, as he is wont to do. And Kat, I learned you are an opera goer.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did this land with you?
So, I'm not gonna lie. I get what he's saying.
What?
It is a struggling medium, and I think it costs about the same amount to like put on an opera like now as it did like 200 years ago. Like, it's a very expensive medium, and technology hasn't changed that. Ticket sales are down. Like at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, which is one of the biggest live performance companies in the world, their revenue is way down. They've been dipping into their endowment fund. They are truly struggling, and if they can't figure it out, like they're probably like a bellwether for opera companies all over the place. There have been times when I go to the opera because the music is very complex. It's unlike anything I listen to. I listen to a lot of music on Spotify. It's a sensory overload thing for me that I like. The music is complex. The sets are unbelievable. If you're going to like a traditional opera, not one of those modern operas.
Are you trying to get lyrics? Do you go and like get a translation? Is it story, or is it more just the pure athleticism of those voices and
the athleticism? Like, so I'm
the spectacle.
My mother is an amateur opera singer. I've done some singing. I was a theater performer as a kid, so I love the complexity of the performance and all the aspects of the art. There's a live orchestra. It's wild. It's a wild production to go. But there are times when I have been in the opera and I've been like, I get why this is a dying medium, because it's slow, right? You have to kind of squint to see it. It's really tough to compare. And I'm somebody who loves this medium. It's tough to compare to like that hit of dopamine that you get scrolling on TikTok for a couple of minutes. I know when you spend too much time on it, it's bad.
It's
but like,
also hard to compare what that does to your brain, versus the like
so I get
the joy
why.
And the strength that is like grown in your noggin when you actually sit down and pay attention to something that's difficult to process.
Yep. The audiences tend to be a lot older. It's like, Shakespeare. You're supposed to know the story before you get in there, so you know what you're watching. It's often in different languages. It's hard to understand what opera singers are saying, even when it is in English. So, like, I get why there are all these challenges for a modern audience to want to enjoy it. I will say, I do take as many opportunities to indoctrinate people into that, like, old school style art. I'm taking 2 adolescent boys to see the ballet this weekend. One of them is not happy with me, and I'm hoping
PNB, the Pacific Northwest Ballet.
Yeah, there's
I love it.
Children's focused opera happening this weekend, and I just want to turn them. I want to flip them into art lovers.
Kat Smith, opera lover, actually very understanding of Timothy, even though it did create a lot of outrage in the art community. I want to just briefly say we reached out to the Seattle Opera about that promotion code, and they said that they sold a total of 203 tickets with the code, and that brought in $28,828 over the weekend in sales. Millions of impressions on that ad, and definitely more sales than a typical March weekend. So maybe we should be thanking Timmy for that little boost. And we'll leave you here with Kat's favorite opera. Kat Smith, politics editor at KUOW. Thank you so much. There's a little bit of the magic flute as we go out.
It's so amazing. I cry every time.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.